Hey everyone, I'm very excited because I've been reading this book and it just goes to show you how if you find and read the right books, it can give you some valuable insight and information on whatever you want to accomplish or your problems in life, and it can change how you view things. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of people. They are uninformed and they have very narrow-minded opinion or belief on their situation in life. And because of that, they don't realize what can be accomplished or where they can go or other ways of looking at it that may make you think, that's interesting, and it can make you more happier. It can make you set new goals. It can take you out of your predicament. Now, I'm still along this journey. Don't take me as some sort of guru who has achieved everything. And I'm still searching for the right amazing books or the best things out there. And I have a whole list that I haven't read yet. Um, but this book is quite interesting. It's called I Could Do Anything If I Only Knew What It Was. And it's a great book on just how it's a great book on life lessons and things along that nature. Another great one is called Poor Charlie's Almanac. It's by Charlie Munger. He's a billionaire, but in terms of his life and living as a person, his book is very interesting because it talks about parenting. It talks about how you should consider old age once you get there, and accepting it and why you should accept it. And he uses examples from history, from philosophers, all these things that just make you think, wow, it's very interesting. And he has accounts of his children and how they grew up parented by him and all these different things. And it's just like, wow, it's very interesting how he has unique ways of thinking of things. One of the things he uses is a thing called inversion, where if you want to achieve something or avoid something or do something, you invert everything. And he says in math, it's a very ingenious way of solving a problem you couldn't solve, and you could use it in real life too. So let's say you want to achieve success in life. Well, why don't you invert that and see what you don't do that is guaranteed to make you fail in life? And those things are sloth and unreliability. Those are the two big things he mentions. And being late all the time, being a mess, so forth. Anyhow, this is a book that's also fairly good. I wouldn't say it's perfect. I've been sort of skimming through it, and some parts are pretty good. Let me just give you the big facts, and if you're interested, she gives examples, real life examples of people she's worked with, and people she's known to back it up. Dozens of them. But one thing she stresses is how mindset and how you think of things is very important. And oftentimes, also, it's not your fault in that you aren't informed of these other mindsets or beliefs. Another thing is exercise is very important on many levels. Um, and she gives many examples of this. If you exercise and you're suffering from depression or withdrawal from uh, abstaining from drugs, trying to quit drugs, uh, exercise will naturally lift your mood, naturally increase your happiness, and so forth. And it can help you in getting rid of drugs or achieving happiness. And another big thing is she talks about getting rid of this sort of eternal hell. What I mean by that is some people have a very singular dream, and I think this is where follow your passion, that phrase, gets it wrong. It sort of implies that you have one single passion, and some people do. And she gives a few examples of people who are on the professional athlete pathway and they are a star and they make it and they're about to be on the professional circuit, and then they get a life-altering injury that takes them out. And it's interesting because the more and more I just expose myself to reading about this and watching videos, I keep stumbling across this. Because in addition to the examples in my book, this actually happens quite often, like throughout life, sometimes in high school or college. And then I saw two examples in videos. So there's this one man whose name is Lewis Howes. He was about to be a professional athlete as well, and it didn't work out. He got dramatically injured. And it's interesting because the videos I saw, the only reason I saw them were because they had achieved success in some other calling. At the time, they only had one central goal in mind, which was, I want to be a star at this sport, whether it was basketball or football or baseball. And it was in the book. It was baseball and figure skating and ballet, and they were professionals, making money off of it. And they one in particular got the injury, and then for the next 10 years lived in an eternal hell, as he calls it, just completely like depressed and hopeless in life. And he was like a salesman. And I think you can see like the difference between the people in these videos and the people this man. And this man finally worked through it. He worked with this author, and then they did a bunch of these exercises, which is another thing. It's like a lack of knowledge. They did a few exercises mentioned in this book, like pulling out the essential things that made the qualities that made your initial job great, and the things that you couldn't live without. So those things happen to be like having a feeling of mastery at a skill and so forth. And he pulled those things out, and then he started working them into his own job, and then finding new jobs that he can incorporate those into. And then he started building up on that. And so, I mean, I do think this book isn't perfect, you know. It's interesting though, and from the videos I watched with Lewis Howes, who's now a very successful, rich man, who he still is in sports, but he chose to move into sports consulting, and he grew a vast network, and he's very successful. And he grew it through LinkedIn, which is an online professional network, and he wrote a book on LinkedIn because he was one of the first people to master it, and on and on and on. And there's another video about a man who's who's about to be a professional soccer player, and an injury where he did all this sore surgery, it didn't heal him, and there he was. He was just screwed over by circumstance, but he didn't let it stop him. He and his friend worked as he worked as a pizza delivery boy for about a few years, and his friend worked as a house cleaner. And I mean, this is just a great story of by example of these people who changed their lives. They pursued music, which is a new passion that they liked. So again, it's a blessing to have more than one passion sometimes, as a backup or maybe a fusion. And they now live very comfortably. They're very wealthy, producing and creating music on the computers for very big name clients. And it's interesting because his friend was Asian and had to grow up with all these Asian stereotypes, and he decided, I don't want to do that. You know, he got great grades in school, all this stuff, and he decided to pursue music, and that was a big risk. He had to work as a house cleaning person for a few years, and then his music career finally took off. And it's very interesting how that sort of world works. And again, not everyone can achieve that success. They may not have that immediate talent, or they can immediately see that sort of pathway in front of them. But it's interesting how that can work and how you can maybe use some parts of that in your own life. And if you guys want to check it out, I'm not just pulling the story out of my head. Uh, that story is from the YouTube channel called Asian Boss. You can look that up. And I mean, this book it goes on and on about stuff. I just want to get the main points because it's a thick book. I honestly didn't go through the whole thing because sometimes she does sort of ramble, not necessarily ramble, but talk about sort of non-concrete stuff a lot. Just like stuff about yourself, dealing with yourself, mapping your life, things like that. And so I sort of skipped around a lot and got to the points that really I found interesting and useful. And one thing was realizing that it's okay, and sometimes you can just end up having bad luck. And that was very interesting to me because I had gone through a lot of these self-development, bestseller, self-improvement books, and their whole motto is, hey, everything is your fault. Once you take complete responsibility and stop blaming other people, you can start transforming your own life rather than using other people or other situations as a crutch. Which is true to a certain extent, because if you're coming from the opposite extreme of everything's everyone else's fault and you're in a very negative mindset, you will never change your life, control it, and move forward. On the flip side, though, she's saying that if you ever get to a point, because American culture and how things are put out, everyone's emphasizing, oh, it's your own responsibility, work hard, push forward, everything's your fault, potential. You can end up just constantly blaming yourself. And there are situations where, sometimes you just lucked out horribly. And she gives examples of a Fortune 100 executive who loses his job and can't find another one. And then the TV news reporter who loses her great job and then can't find another one for other networks. And for those, I'm just like, well, how does that make sense? Like, if you have a valuable skill, you should be able to easily find something for another network. But she also gives relevant examples, such as those athletes who spent their whole lives on this one thing, and then out of their control, an injury during practice or during a game puts them out for life. That makes sense to me. And she says, it's okay. Those are instances where you have to come to terms with it, accept it, realize that it was luck. Some things are out of your control. You can't control the universe. You can't. If you're 90 years old, you're probably not going to be the lead star in a teen pop culture film, or you're not going to be able to invent teleportation overnight. Stuff like that. So I think it's very interesting how she puts these new perspectives in your mind, and then she also goes on to say stuff like, I mean, it's chock full of new insights. And again, I always try and it's always very hard to bring the right amount of skepticism to it, so you don't fully believe everything, and then you take in bad advice, but at the same time, you take in the good advice as well. But I try to do that. And another thing she mentions is you can't have exceptional expectations off the gate. And she says people who think that they can achieve a life of absolute perfect happiness and bliss and achieved everything close to immediately, they are setting themselves up for failure. They have expectations that are unachievable. And she gives the example of a woman who tried to find a career that was just, she'd gone through jobs and jobs and jobs. And apparently she was at a point where she was just, she had exceptionally high expectations that could not be met. And because of that, she was like unemployed or something like that. Basically, she wanted a job that was absolutely perfect, and she would not settle for anything less. And the author was like, well, you can't do that. Like, why don't you set baby steps first? Like, why don't you at least get a job and work from the jobs that you're always unhappy with to a job that you're at least not unhappy with. Maybe you're not exceptionally happy with them, but you're not unhappy with them. So this book brings a lot of great points. I think it's well worth to read, or at least to skim through. It'll bring some great ideas. The author, if you must know, she's a therapist who has conducted a lot of work-related careers, spent a lot of time, and had a lot of experience working with a lot of people. I do think though her goal is more towards moving people from one career pathway or mindset and belief system to another. And most of the time, I mean, pretty much all the time, from the examples I've seen, it's never really focused on creating wealth. She's usually moving people from one place to another, from one job to another, and ultimately it's usually focused on creating happiness. So it's usually like, okay, this was a man who's a salesman who's lived in a horrible situation, working for 10 years after he had a career-altering injury when he could have been a baseball player. We're going to work with him, and now he's going to be a better salesperson who loves his job or masters his job, or a person who doesn't know what he wants to do, and then he turns it into a degree in philosophy, and now he works with the ministry. So it's the thing with this book is it's not really geared towards making wealth. Her achievements are more towards making these people more fulfilled and happy with their lives, which isn't necessarily in creating, also making them wealthy. So it's a very different mindset, which isn't completely good because, again, there's other ways and different philosophies out there. Not any of them are right or wrong. I think it's kind of like MMA fighting, where you take the best parts of each philosophy out and you try and bring them together, which might not work either, because unlike MMA fighting, if you take out little parts of stuff, you can end up with a Frankenstein-like beast, and certain philosophies work when you completely indoctrinate that one thing and just accept it. So these are just different theories. Test out what works for you. But at least for this book, it's different from other ones and other philosophies where it's like, you want to stick to one thing for the rest of your life, because then you will master and become an expert at it and be a rare novelty in this world. And because of that, all this value will flood towards you, and you will get a lot of wealth from that. And their whole philosophy is like, once you get wealth helps a long way in achieving happiness, which I'm not going to lie, it's partially true to a certain level, and on and on and on. Thanks for watching. See you guys later.